Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gerardo Poli.
And this, sorry. Okay.
One of the best bits of advice I've ever received was to find good mentors and to learn from them. Trusted people who have already done what you're trying to do now. I've been fortunate throughout my career to have some fantastic mentors to help guide me, but I realized that they'd be hard to find and also hard to commit the time to one. This is why we've gathered some of the best minds from the veterinary world and squeezed them for their wisdom so that you don't have to learn the hard way.
With the help of our guests, we flip the veterinary profession on its back and explore its soft underbelly to find the tips, tools, and inspiration that you'll need to build the career that you've always wanted.
I'm Gerardo Poli.
I'm Hubert Hemstra, and this is the Vet Vault.
Most vets who've been in the profession for some time think that they have some pretty solid communication skills. What do you think, Hubert?
I'd say so, yeah. I've certainly learned a few things over the last couple of years.
Well, I don't know. That's where I think you're wrong. Apparently, most vets don't do all that well when it comes to the kind of communication that our clients really want from us. Did you know that according to a study done, the average time it takes for a vet to interrupt the conversation
Sorry, G, I wasn't really listening. What were you saying?
Okay. Well, not only did you interrupt, but also you weren't listening. So that's two things. But this is exactly the reason why we contacted Professor Cindy Adams to give us some insights on communication done the right way.
Cindy Adams is a professor in the Department of Veterinary Clinical and Diagnostic Sciences at the University of Calgary, where she teaches in the Clinical Communication and Professional Skills programs. She works to improve communication practices in veterinary medicine and education. Dr. Adams has developed evidence-based communication curricula and methods for teaching, learning, and evaluating communication skills across North America, the UK, and Australia. Her work forms the basis for communication skills taught in many vet schools around the globe.
Her co-authored book, Skills for Communicating in Veterinary Medicine, was released in 2016. And has earned widespread recognition in the veterinary medical practice and education around the globe. Cindy is also a popular speaker at conferences around the world, and we are thrilled to have her with us on the Vet Vault.
In this episode, Cindy tells us why we all need to increase our efforts in improving our communication skills, how to rapidly gain client trust, and how to set yourself up for the perfect consult. And I guarantee you that this is not just for new graduates. It doesn't matter where you are in your vet career, you're bound to learn something new here.
We talk about agenda setting, listening, perceptual skills, and how to have difficult conversations about money. And Cindy also answers a few burning questions our listeners have about tricky communication situations. And when you're done listening, check out the show notes for the resources that Cindy mentions in the episode. There's some very useful stuff about talking about money, talking about medical errors, and how to run training programs for better communication. Now, get your listening ears on and enjoy Professor Cindy Adams.
And one more thing. If you enjoy this podcast and you feel that you've gained something from it, then please tell a few of your friends about it. In fact, don't just tell them. Forward the link to them. And then ask them a week later if they've listened to it yet. And if they say no, then make them put their headphones in their ear and sit there with them to make sure they listen. And then tell them to give us a 5-star review on iTunes, please. Good evening, Cindy, and welcome to the podcast.
Good evening. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for making the time to chat to us. I just wanted to clarify so I get it and so that the listeners all know. So you teach communication skills to veterinary students and set the curriculum and communication for several universities is it globally or just in the States and in Canada?
Yeah, so it's globally. I've just come back from Latin America, working with schools there to try to set a communication program in place. Calgary's it's a bit of a model, I guess, in some ways for things that are pretty decent about what it takes to have a program. So we have a lot of visitors come here as well and get training. So if I'm not out teaching in different places, people come here for training.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That's amazing. How long have you been doing this for with regards to the participating or leading the communication side of veterinary medicine at Calgary?
Yeah, and so, it even started before that. I'm a graduate of the Ontario Veterinary College and had a huge interest. My first career is in social work. I think some of you know, I practiced social work for 17 years. And in that time, every context I worked in, jails, women's shelters, et cetera, had animals inherent to them. And so I had this huge interest. And there was this lovely scholarship at the Ontario Veterinary College. I got it, and I got to go do my studies there and then try to integrate human and animal health and well-being vis-a-vis a communication program. So I started that program in 2000 at OVC, the Ontario Veterinary College, and then I got brought to Calgary in 2006 to try to build the program here. And Alberta is a relatively wealthy province, and so the big draw for me was actually having money that I could to build a good program. So I've been doing it since 2006.
Wow.
And then you said at the talk I heard you at, you said your daughter is also a recent graduate vet. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Camille, my daughter, she's working up north. So that would be about 9 hours from Calgary. She's a mixed animal doc. And what's fascinating about Camille's story, she talks to me once a week or so, or sometimes every night, depending on how the day goes. But amazing things have happened for her. She's obviously been immersed in communication. She was a Calgary grad, so she had the depth of teaching here, but she's like the top 3 salesperson in the practice of 12 doctors. And she, and I mean, I don't mean it to be about money, but what I mean it to be is that her skills have certainly contributed to her ability to work with clients and affect patients' health outcomes and get adherence. So this stuff really works. So that's the types of stories that she tells me. She's also able to retrieve money from clients for which have been, clients of the practice for years, but are really don't pay their bills. Yeah. And so Camille's also been very successful in getting some money in the bank for the practice owners. So again, she attributes that to communication.
So does she actually listen to your advice, or is she like most kids do? I know my kids will listen to anybody other than me, but if I try and teach them something, dad doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, it sounds like yours are younger than mine. I mean, she's 30 and she's old enough to know. She's pretty convinced though. I mean, we problem solve a lot of things, medical errors, what happens when that happens, what about the people that don't pay money? So she puts stuff into practice.
Lovely. And so teaching of communication skills to students, I think it's come a long way. I qualified almost 20 years ago now, and in my veterinary course back in South Africa, our communication training was one Friday afternoon for about 2 hours. And there was a sort of an unspoken rule. Anything that was scheduled for a Friday afternoon normally meant it's not going to be an exam, so don't worry about it. You kind of come with me if you want to. So everybody would sit there planning the weekend instead of really listening. I think the only thing I remember from our communication training was, and it's probably not the worst lesson in the world. The guy who taught us said, every client who comes in the door has something written on his forehead that spells, "Please make me feel important."
Nice,
which is not it's a good place to start, but that's literally all I remember from communication. Do you find, Cindy, that there's still to some degree a perception that communication skills are a nice to have thing, but not essential, and that it's one of the soft skills, so to speak, rather than one of the more important clinical skills? Do you still find that?
Well, I certainly found that when I started, it was a beast. I mean, it was a really tough go. Now it's so much a part of our culture. I think North America wide, it's a big part of the culture. When I travel elsewhere, like I mentioned, it's not necessarily so. I mean, it takes me back a good 15, 20 years where you've got a lot of naysayers, people that don't believe in it. You've got a few keen people like yourselves who get it, amidst a lot of folks that go, no way, you're not taking time from anatomy, you're not taking it from ClinPath. I mean, I'm doing schedules right now. I have a very substantive course. It's 1/3 of the curriculum. So a lot of my colleagues have had to surrender time and start to teach more efficiently so that we can, address the communication. So the students are bought in, and the number one, the third most highly ranked feature of our graduates are the communication skills. So our hosts, our doctors that are receiving them they're seeing a huge difference because they're getting graduates from other colleges in Canada.
Wow, that's incredible. A third of the curriculum. Yeah.
Do you get feedback from practice then? It's interesting. So if you guys have a very strong communication program, is there any information to show that your graduates do better in terms of satisfaction and less mental health issues, or find practice easier in the first few years? Is there any feedback in that regard?
It's a great question. It's a piece of research that we'd like to do. We need to follow them out into graduation. Mm-hmm. We get we're now going out to the practices, and we're a pretty disparate province, a lot like parts of Australia that I visited, where we have a distributed model. So on our fourth year, the students don't have a teaching hospital. They go out into the practices. And we're now out there flying around and doing workshops with these host practitioners that take our students that haven't necessarily had the communication training. Mm. And they're starting to comment that they're noticing, our students have obviously things to work on, but they're noticing that they're different, and they will put them in front of really challenging conversations, challenging clients, and our students are pretty steady. So that's what they're telling us. But we need to do that research. We need to follow them out in practice now and find out if they're holding the skills and what impact it's having.
It almost certainly has to. From sample of one, which is myself, if I just think of how much easier life became after 5 or 10 years of practice, where you start just figuring it out for yourself and learning communication skills off your own bat, suddenly work just becomes a lot less stressful and a lot more fun. But it'd be fantastic research to see.
Yeah, it would be. It's a great project. We need to do that.
I over the last maybe last year, I've did quite a lot of reading, and also attended several workshops, about 4 workshops on consultation skills and dealing with clients and difficult clients and things like that. And I actually read your book. I read the book. And I must admit, there were some sections in there that are a little bit dry.
Oh, yeah.
But there is heaps of research in there. It references so many human and veterinary, so much human and veterinary literature. And there was some key aspects there that really changed the way that I view the consultation process. We use the Calgary, Cambridge style at university. We were taught that at university, and so the kind of flow made sense, and that always was the kind of core backbone of our consultation styles. But even just the one big thing, which was really building partnerships and mutually agreed agendas, and confirming with them, and the whole concept that their concerns that they talk about aren't necessarily in order of importance. That was a really big one for me, which is like, oh wow, they could say 5 things that were concerning them, but then it's up to you to determine which one was most important. And through questioning and clarifying and developing mutually agreed agendas and things, and developing partnerships. So there was a couple key things, and it just blew my mind that the person who was there may not necessarily actually be talking in a sort of a concise and coherent manner, that the most important thing was the first thing they said. Was there any kind of piece of research there that really blew your mind, or was a big light bulb moment for yourself when you were developing this program?
Well, your point is very, very valid. And that's quite often clients will come in and they will volley concerns in the order of, in terms of safety, how safe they feel with us. And so they might, tread lightly to see how we react, to see how we grab hold of things. And so that's why this, I talk a little bit about in the book about the Frisbee versus the shot put model, right? Like it's really this iterative process of, checking back and forth. Mrs. Smith, you came in first and you mentioned that that he needs to have his nails trimmed. You also mentioned, he's having trouble getting up and down the stairs, and he's eating a little bit less than normal. I just want to, I'm going to ask you questions about all those things, but I'm really going to start with one in particular because it's really caught my attention. Would that be okay with you? So it's that kind of back and forth, even though they've identified he needs a nail trim, but you're thinking, oh dear, trouble going up and down the stairs, it's a golden retriever, a little bit overweight, that type of thing. So it's really about this revisiting, resorting, reprioritizing, screening, that variable that you see in the Calgary Cambridge Guide. And once you've got the agenda, it doesn't mean it's necessarily done. It's that one more volley of just asking, you've mentioned this, this, and this. What else? What other additional things? My mind says we might want to reprioritize those differently than how you presented. Is that okay? Well, absolutely. But I don't like his nails being long. And so I thought we could trim those. Okay, of course we will. I'm going to kind of go revisit the stairs, getting up that type of thing. So it's a dialogue as opposed to just grab and hold and taking off. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. The other thing that really kind of highlighted for me as I was reading was that when we start to ask closed-ended questions, right, we start to control the conversation more. And it's generally, I think there was one section in there and it talked about how that's us going into diagnosing mode. So we kind of close down the actual consultation or the interview really, and then go into our diagnosing mode. What information do we need as doctors to solve your problem, right? So we then close ourselves off to actually developing partnerships and having a conversation. It's like, did he vomit? How many times did he vomit? Did he have diarrhea? When he was his last dewormed? Okay, so he had vomiting, diarrhea as a puppy, hasn't been dewormed in several months, he's got worms or something.
Right.
So you start going down these pathways trying to ask questions which match your particular differential that you've got in your head, as opposed to actually still continuing the conversation and being open to what they may say, because with an open-ended question there, they might actually divulge more and more information. That he got into the bin and he ate more food, and the children's leftovers on the table that may have upset his guts or something instead. So it's a valuable book, and we'll put it in the show notes. But I found the text actually quite insightful. For anyone who out there is wants to read it, I think it's worth reading. So
that's great. No, just not at bedtime.
Yeah, it took me about 2 months to read. Like I had to read it in sections, but yeah.
But Gerardo, what you describe there, I'm certainly guilty of that. But it's turning it into a question for you, Cindy. So the reason we probably do that is time pressure. So most veterinarians have time pressure. We want to get through the day. What's your take on that? Having the perfect communication-wise consulting style, is that more time consuming, or how do you teach that to still make people? You can't have a half an hour consult every time and have a deep and meaningful connection with every client, or can you and still do it in a timely fashion?
Well, the work that we've done, we've actually shown that once mastered, this takes less time. So having a more bio-lifestyle social conversation, which has a relationship-centered care approach, which is really a balance between them talking, us talking, because we're doing, as you suggest, we're asking some open-ended questions, pausing and letting people talk, actually takes less time. 10.3 seconds post-mastery compared to 11.6. When you're more biomedical, eating, drinking, vomiting, diarrhea, when you've got this kind of going in real hard and asking those closed-ended questions, what we see in the data is we go in like really firm, closed-ended questions, and then we get all relaxed at the tail end of the conversation. We use empathy statements. We start letting our hair down a bit, and the whole thing just goes. It extends the length. So this tightening of, as Gerardo said, this, starting with our open questions, because the open-ended questions, things like tell me what PJ typically eats in a day, starting from first thing in the morning to the end of the day. Tell me about your greatest concerns if we go through with this. Those types of questions not only yield good data, but they also invite client perspective. And that's something that is terribly shyly developed in veterinary client-patient consultations. It's clients' concerns, their expectations, their beliefs, rightly or wrongly, might not be right, but they still believe in something. And if we don't acknowledge it, they're not going to let it go. It's their values. So it's that invitation through open-ended invites. And as we get more astute in this work, you might be saying, oh, for heaven's sake, how do you do that all in the 10.3 seconds? We get a little more precise about what we ask, a little more skillful about being engaged with people, like the accepting response. Doesn't mean that we agree or even maybe necessarily adore the client, but it means that we accept them as a human being. And once we get that tidy, we're off. So that's the work that we've done.
Can I just to clarify? So an example of an open-ended or a closed-ended versus an open-ended question. Two examples, or one example?
Well, an example. So an open-ended question it does not result in the ability of a person to say yes or no. So closed-ended questions. Is she drinking okay? Those types of things that we often do because we're trying to skirt along versus, what are your thoughts on starting Rory on heartworm preventative year round? What are your thoughts about starting them versus is she on heartworm?
Okay.
Have you ever used heartworm before? Has she ever been on heartworm meds? Yes, no, versus what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about that? So, it's a bit of you're stick handling both types of questions. They're both very valid. Yeah. The issue is our tendency has been to start there versus the invitation to be open up front earlier on.
Okay.
When we went through the training with our vets, I found like if you could put a what at the start of a sentence, generally makes whatever thing you're thinking an open-ended question. Nice. So it was like if you have an idea and you open and you just say what, and then you have to finish it off, but still ask that question. It generally results in an open-ended question, I found. So, but when we talked before, Cindy, about empathy statements, one of the things that we tackled was actually people who don't necessarily feel naturally empathetic, but feel like asking an empathetic question or trying to become more empathetic feels a bit fake to them. Like, so I'm a very clinical person, and I like science and I like the problem solving aspect of veterinary medicine. But I realized over time, actually, one thing where I really realized empathy was actually when I used to work as a librarian. Maybe I can just beep that out. Actually, I'm not going to say that I ever did that.
No ways. That's staying in.
When I went through uni, and before uni, actually, before I became a vet, started studying. I was a librarian at local council libraries, and there was a whole lot of. I had quite a lot of interactions with the elderly public, and developed, I think over time, I really developed the appreciation for people, because I used to have conversations with them all the time, and they used to share their stories, and I think naturally there I started to develop this feeling of empathy, or wanting to demonstrate empathy, because I used to share quite long stories about about their lives and things as I was shopping books. But I wanted to say something that I was like acknowledging and listening, like I heard, I can see, I can hear, I can feel, I can imagine, or something like that. But for those who are clinical and who like the kind of concise conversation and not necessarily feel like they should have to develop and cultivate this kind of relationship with the client, empathy statements I found really don't come naturally to them. And so how do you broach that with the students or with clinicians who feel uncomfortable with demonstrating empathy?
Yeah, well, again, another you both asked really good questions. So what we do know, again, from the research, is that we can teach empathy. Some of us, it comes to us more naturally than others. Some of us, like me, I have to tone it down sometimes because I can be annoying. Right? It depends on the environment. Every context doesn't warrant a lot of empathy. And so in some situations don't as well. it's clinical skill. So I teach it in the frame of it's clinical skill. This isn't about being like a psychotherapist. It's about having in your repertoire of skills it is such a powerful way of building rapport. And the science that we've been chipping away at has we found two things. One is that empathy and shared decision making are two of the strongest predictors of adherence. So we got to build this into our toolbox for sure. We teach it in that kind of pro forma way, like I can see, I can hear, I can feel. That's empathy 101. And naming affect. I can hear that you're sad. I can hear that you're thrilled. I can see that you're super excited about this new puppy in your life. So it's not just for sad situations either. So sometimes I find if people can practice with something that's less emotional or affectual, it might be easier. The other thing that we do is, I mean, when we teach it, we have actors. So, and as you may have had at your school, they will let students know how that felt. And if the timing of an empathy statement, what impact it had. Was it too much, too little? Was it too late in the consultation, for which relationship was never established until later on, and then it was kind of too late? And so this is good skill. The other thing is some of the research coming out of medicine is finding that developing the practice of mindfulness is a strong predictor of advanced levels of empathy, of ability of people to be empathetic. And so I don't know if it's about the stillness that we participate in when we do mindfulness practice, but there's something about being in touch with ourselves and a little more grounded that enables us to be more compassionate or empathetic towards other people. So that's kind of a branch of science that's going on at the medical school, probably in your schools too. And so we might need to tackle that, which is interesting because that's kind of on our radar in vet med as well.
So how do you, at this point, how do you recommend working on mindfulness? What's your strategy for that?
Well, I don't think that I'm an expert in that area. I know that it is part of our strategic plan here in the veterinary curriculum to try to provide more training, more opportunity for students and faculty to grab hold of this particular practice of mindfulness. I think starting off, we got to get I don't think I want to be having people laying in chairs and doing mindfulness right off the bat. I don't think that would work for everyone, much like meditation or yoga and such. I think it's a little bit of inner work that needs to happen just around inner matters related to authenticity, learning how to ask open and honest questions, like really getting inside the box a little bit before we can put them into these exercises. The last part of my answer is in our curriculum, in this course in communication, they do a number of assignments like reflective journal writing, which that didn't start off very good in the 2000s, but the writing, the reflecting on interactions with clients. They're also doing self-recorded appraisals of their interactions. So we record everything and then they have to take it away and dissect it and think about and answer questions like, what were you thinking, at certain points? What did you think the client was thinking? It's like getting up on the balcony and watching themselves on the dance floor is as I describe it, right? You got to get up here and see what you're doing down here. So we try to facilitate that. Whether it sticks, I don't know.
Why did you say it didn't start off well when you started it?
Oh, I think it's back to your point because it was so new. I mean, these veterinary students, as Gerardo said, you're scientists, like it's writing a journal was just painful for them, right? That being reflective and thinking about how they were feeling and how the other person was feeling. It was just, I just about lost my job over it.
Really?
It was just so new. But it's becoming, narrative medicine's becoming more and more popular in vet med. So.
Narrative medicine. Sorry, explain that, sorry?
Yeah, well, I think it's, again, further to both of your points, it's about things that are happening in practice now where practices are fostering and facilitating writing and using the writing as a forum for rounds, having specific sessions around people's writing and their what they took away from an interaction, what they didn't, what they could have done better, what they did well. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of where I'm seeing this going a little bit. So this very successful practices are starting to integrate this into their routines.
We, as part of our training, our veterinarians who transition into our practice. So we're an emergency after hours hospital. They shadow our consultations, regardless of how long they've been out, because we had quite a lot of procedures and protocols that kind of for a large hospital. But then also what we do is, depending on how long they've been out for, we have closed loop security systems, and I might be in a different room listening to a consult as the veterinarian's going through the consult, especially if they're a new grad. And quite often what might happen would be that we give them some lines that help them get out of the room. Oh, I left my thermometer at the back. Actually, I just got to go check something with a senior colleague or something. Or do you mind if I take Fluffy out the back so that I can get his temperature or something, So give them some way of getting out. And then quite often what will happen is they'll use that escape word or something, and they'll come into the next room and they're like, what happened then? And I was like, oh, okay, you didn't hear what she said, or you didn't hear that actually, maybe go back and say this, and then that might open the doors again, and then address their concerns and understand and so forth, and then go back in and then they try something different.
Nice.
And I'm not saying that I'm a pro consulter, but I'd learned so much from the text and Alison Lambert's stuff as well.
Yeah, nice.
And listening back to your own consultations was really powerful, especially when you think that, I was in there for so long, and you realize you're only in there for 8 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And that story that the client said went on forever when it was like only 45 seconds. That was her opening statement, those kind of things. So I don't know whether or not some people out there have the ability, but sometimes what we'll do is we'll ask the client whether or not we can record this for training purposes, and stick your phone in the room and put it on record, and they soon forget it's there. So
that's excellent. I mean, that's state of the art. That's really where we need to be going with this work. I mean, we can do as much as we can in schools. It's really when the rubber hits the pavement and you're out in practice, and to have coaching and feedback and that kind of mentorship is spectacular, because you can be, you're integrating now other clinical content with communication skills, and even back to the schools, we need to ensure that communication is not a standalone weird kind of thing, but it's integrated with clinical medicine and other procedures. So that's, I wanted to just kind of go back to that. And your point, I mean, that's just brilliant. If you can, and what I found with clients is when we tell them that we're recording so that we can get better, they're thrilled to think that we're really looking at ourselves, and trying to improve how we communicate, how we interact. That's great.
So you go.
No, I was going to ask you, both of you, how do the vets respond though to the idea of being recorded and your big brother spied on? Do you get any resistance to it, or are people pretty open to the idea?
Yeah,
we get a little bit of, well, in the interview we actually say, look, as part of your training, we will watch consultations and things, and to be honest, actually, the video recordings, the security camera footage is there for safety.
Yeah,
and also it's there to clarify what's being discussed in the room. So quite often we will use it for client complaints, and they will make accusations, or their recollections of the consultation conversation may be different. So we would go back and listen, and then we'll say, actually, it was said this way, and our veterinarian did say that. Would you like to hear the recording? And quite often they're like, oh, did I say that? Okay, no, that's fine. Like, I'm sorry, it was my misunderstanding. So, and sometimes what we do is we almost use it as a treatment waiver somewhat. It's like, so just clarifying that and you decided to So if that's okay, I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, or we're on the same page. Is that okay? Is that what is that what your thoughts are at this stage? And then, so therefore it's on camera in those situations where you don't want to pull out you document it down the history, but sometimes it's enough that actually, you don't want to go, hey, look, on the way out, can you sign a treatment waiver, just to say that you went against my recommendations?
Okay.
Yeah. So, but quite often, so it is, at least from my experience, is that the veterinarians do feel a bit uncomfortable, but they feel a lot better about you listening in, right, rather than you sitting in the corner like a weirdo listening to their consults. especially if I'm a guy and the vet's a female,
Yeah.
like the owners will look at me, and it's like, no, I'm not leading this. I'm just in the corner like a weirdo, you know? Yeah. So I don't know, Cindy, what's your perspective or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think very much the same. I mean, I don't think there's not a readiness on everyone's behalf for this work, right? I mean, some people are really not comfortable. I think if you set it up at a point of hiring, that's brilliant. I think also you have to have people, as you describe yourself, like you've got to do this in a supportive fashion. It's not about catching people doing the wrong things, and it's got to be really balanced. And I always like to, when I'm giving feedback, I use the model called ALOBA, agenda-led outcome-based analysis, and I'm happy to share that with you. But it's always starting with the learner's agenda. You know, I'm going to be hanging outside the door today. I'm going to be listening, or I'm going to be by the table or whatever. And what do you want to work on? Like, what's your focus? So really making it their stuff, not me going in and saying, dang, you really need to work on that, John. Like, you know, really, really letting them feel empowered. So I'll send that along and you might find that useful.
Yeah. Put that in the link.
That's really cool.
That would be brilliant.
Yeah.
So in your teaching, and then you said earlier before we started recording that you do consulting or teaching in private practice as well to veterinarians. I think one of the most common communication related problems that you find that people struggle with, or mistakes that people make in the veterinary communication?
Oh gosh, some of the well, but the lovely thing is that there's themes, and so at least we're not working on everything. So much is good. Like there's a lot of good work going on. I think taking us back to earlier in the conversation, agenda setting, that's rare, very, very rare, and quite often clients or producers aren't asked what it is that's on their mind. Really. I mean, it's sort of the presenting complaint, they get right to the patient, bingo, versus, you know, my lead hand's sick, I don't have any help with the cattle. I can't have any, you know, I can't be doing anything frequent with these animals, you know, and so not understanding the context or the story, or, you know, I am pregnant, as you can see, I'm 8 months. This dog is I'm having difficulty. I had to get my neighbor to come over and help lift her in the back of the car. I need some options here without taking the time to do that. So that's not happening. What we see is a fair bit of asymmetry where we think that our veterinarians are thinking that they're doing a lot better than our clients are experiencing.
Okay.
So that's a little rough. I see the interruptions are wicked. I think you've read some of my work. I mean, 15.3 seconds if we're lucky.
If we're lucky, it's even lower in some references, isn't it?
Until we interrupt, and I just interrupted you.
It's like,
no, that's fine. But
and then 10 seconds later, you know, cut him with a closed or something.
Well, and I think as a society we do that too, right? Like we're rapid, we think fast, we move fast. Sorry, and I interrupted you.
No, not at all. It's really funny. I listened to your lectures at the AVA conference earlier this year, which I really enjoyed. And you talked about the interruption thing. So ever since then, I've been aware when I consult. The problem is I catch myself a second after I've interrupted. I'm like, damn it, I've done it again. It's such a hard thing, as you say, because you're in a rush. You're trying to get through consults, and ever since you've said that, I find myself doing it over and over again. But it's good because that's mindfulness. At least I'm aware of it, so I can stretch that period of time until I interrupt a little bit longer.
Yeah. Well, you know, you said the word mindful again in a different sort of way than I was taking it. Getting some of the science in front of people. I mean, not to make everybody read the book, maybe highlight some sections or whatever else you think is important. It starts to give a bit of a reference point. Like then they can be a little more aware of their behavior, of our behavior. And so I think, you know, starting with small goals, a couple of things is more manageable than taking on, you know, the 73 skills that are listed in the Calgary Cambridge Guide. But really, you know, as you suggest, being aware, going, oh gosh, look, I read that. I think we're doing that as a profession. I need to not do that anymore. And so I say, you know, start small, and some of the stuff we can practice at home. Yeah.
Like, give us an example. What can I go practice on my family?
Well, on your kids. I mean, open-ended questions, empathy statements, not interrupting, just stuff like that. I mean, it goes a long way. In our ability to practice, but building relationships with them builds good, solid scaffolding, much like it does with clients.
You mentioned agenda setting when you started talking about common mistakes. What clarify agenda setting? What do you do to do that?
Yeah, well, and then I'm going to answer your question, and I'm just going to what I'm going to say is that this should set the frame for the entire consultation. So we use this a bit of as a table of contents, if you will. Okay. It's sort of your table of contents of how this interaction is going to go. And if, as a result of clients revealing somewhere halfway through information that wasn't kind of up in the agenda, something new comes up and you prioritize that as the doctor, you pull it back up and say, I'm adding it to the agenda. So the agenda is really about identifying what brings the client and the patient to the practice. Don't make any assumptions. It also, in light of what they've revealed, it's up to the doctor and other professionals to reprioritize based on kind of your diagnostic reasoning that's already happening and this and that and your differentials. And then to screen and just double check, as I mentioned earlier, just check back in and just say, you've mentioned that you want to use the example again. You want me to trim his nails. You mentioned he's having trouble going up and down the stairs, a little bit of his not eating his dinner as much as he used to. And he seems maybe just not to be as energetic. What else? So again, open-ended question, not is there anything else? Because that's a closed-ended question, right? Mm-hmm. It's shifting our mind to say what else and a pause. And then what we do is we let people know, and this can be for emerge as well. I mean, it's just a little more expedient. Sometimes a little more truncated. Sometimes you got to get the patient back to treatment to get it stabilized. So things might be happening in more of a rapid place or state. I always think of my little Sheltie that got hit by a truck and I went into emerge, and I was incredibly impressed, not only with triaging, taking care of her, getting her stabilized. And the technician said to me, Cindy, what's your greatest worry? And I said, this sounds so ridiculous. I said, but her fur is so matted and covered in dirt. It was not a priority at the moment, but this was a little show Sheltie, and she had been tumbled under a truck, and everything for me, seeing her all mucked up like that was just kind of the epitome of how bad it was. She was broken pretty badly. And she's, we'll get her cleaned up. There's other stuff we need to do as well. And, hand on shoulder, and this is really tough. It's not what we expect to be doing tonight, right? So even in those more urgent, the context changes, but the skills don't. It's just our decision of what we need to do and use in that moment. And without dropping the relationship. It doesn't have to be dropped. It just might have to be expedited.
Yeah, that's excellent.
If you don't mind me asking a bit of maybe a bit more narrowed question, it's not necessarily covered very much in the textbook, but I don't know if there's resources that you've come across, because this would be a big topic for veterinarians out there. I know this for sure, and it'd be around communicating finances and having conversations about money and so forth and things like that. How do you, I don't know how to frame this into a question, as opposed to how do you tackle that? How do you teach veterinary students how to have conversations around money, really?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, both of you have great questions. We've published a fair bit on money, and again, I'm happy to send you those manuscripts if you want. Yes, we know that failure to discuss cost of veterinary care up front can contribute to client suspicion and mistrust. And that's, again, why any verbal clue that's dropped about cost, that sort of the yin and the yang of cost is that regardless of whether people have enough money to do stuff, they still want to know all the options. They don't want to be pigeonholed into already what we think they need to be doing or what we imagine that they can afford or whatever. So 90% of the clients we've surveyed, regardless of whether they have the bucks or not, they want to know. And they want to know, they want to talk about money in terms of the value, not in terms of cost and service for us. They don't care. They don't want to see our fact sheet in the drawer that says, well, compared to human medicine, because we kind of did that in North America for a while, where we grab human health costs and we compare and contrast, and clients found that to be very offensive. They want to talk about the value in terms of prognosis, their ability to care for the animal in light of what's going forward, their ability to maybe travel with their animal to highly infected parasitic places or whatever. So they want to talk about it in that way. What does it mean for them and their animal? And the way we teach this is we get students to grab hold of and or just to even say, this might seem awkward or kind of funny, but I recognize the cost of veterinary care as a consideration of most people. So can I just check in with you and find out, is there some concerns, anything we need to attend to as it relates to going forward with taking care of Molly? So it's about having the verbiage and the softness and the appropriateness and respect. I would say in just about every consultation, I mean, relative to where you are in the series of consultations, but clients are frustrated that we aren't talking money. Mm-hmm. And then they end up feeling outrageously guilty. They feel that they're, in many cases, poor caregivers, or that we are underhanded and sneaky and just out to make money.
Now, I think to put things into context, in Australia, all veterinarians discuss the actual fees, or at least in our practice. And when I was in general practice, we used to talk. But in the States, are there like some with text or something, or would there be financial officers who communicate the actual dollar value or something, or is there a trend where money isn't communicated in the consult room, things are done, and then they kind of hit at the reception desk or something on the way out?
A little bit of everything. So what we've been, I would say there's no consistency here necessarily. At a practice, there might be where they may get the cost of service when they leave. We've found that unless our technicians are really fully trained, they're not necessarily equipped to have the cost conversations as would the doctor be, because of just the issues related to, prognosis and diagnosis and such like that. And so again, clients, they don't quite get what they need. So it really depends. I'm not saying that across the board. Depends on the training that they've had. But cost discussions, it's something, I don't know, we grapple with here, and it sounds like you maybe have mastered that better than us. If clients are given the cost estimates, there may then be an opportunity to just, obviously check in. I mean, what do you do when you're given the costs and the estimates? How do you manage if people say, you've got to be kidding me?
How? Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's acknowledging and hearing it. Okay, and I'll say something like, "Oh, look, I can appreciate this is a significant funds, and I also appreciate that you weren't prepared for this. No one's prepared for emergency situations."
Nice. Well done. Nice.
And then I also try to normalize and go, "Hey, look, if I was in your situation, I'd be struggling too. I'd be feeling the pinch too." Yeah. So I listen, I acknowledge, I kind of normalize it and try to get on the same page. And then I don't justify. I don't go, well, the cost of this is because this facility was $3.5 million and so forth.
Right.
I then go something along the lines of, I link it back to what value the diagnostics will tell us. So going back to what we discussed, the reason why we want to do the x-rays was to address the concerns regarding that you said regarding him eating bones, and also to the other things it will demonstrate to us, will do this and rule out this, and then I'll generally roll off with do you have any concerns, or what are the questions you have, and then to offer them something, I will go, we do have finance options if that helps.
Nice.
Great example. Then I do this awkward kind of count to 4 seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's kind of, but that's them thinking. It's them doing math in their head, calculating the value versus the cost, and then also trying to generate solutions on how to make finances move. The silence isn't them going, or rarely is it them going, you're an ass. How can
if they think you're an ass, they normally say it out, right?
Yeah. Silence is them generally just weighing it up in their head.
That's very Australian. You see, we in Canada don't do that. No, that's a really great example. And to further to your point, I often say, like, resistance means they're engaged. Resistance doesn't mean they're saying no, but it requires a skilled communicator to say, hey, I'm hearing you. I'm seeing your hand up, and I'm seeing this is really not what you expected. Tell me what you're thinking. So again, we're doing some research on the side around resistance, and what we see right now is that when people run from it, like they just take off. It's like, know if there's a prescription, a food prescription, or a preventative a dentistry or surgery. And that quite often when there's resistance, it's dropped. So that's why we've got to build this toolbox of skills to be able to say, you know what? I can do this. This is a helix. It's a back and forth. It's iterative, right? It's once said is never enough. And I'm hearing that you're overwhelmed with what it is I'm proposing. Let's talk about that. So you also, to do that, you got to have some guts to be able to. It's not always going to be always that nice. It's not always going to be, pat in the back and you're so lovely. People might get frustrated. And so again, when we're teaching communication, we're teaching to that higher level of mastery, so we can weather the storm and go beyond just kind of running if someone says no.
Yeah, if they say no, it's like, well, we could do this, which is like, and two jabs of injections or something, or jabs of administering medications, and then home you go,
Yeah.
So, like going from one spectrum of what you believe needs to be done based on the conversation you've had with the client and the problem that was generated and so forth, to all of a sudden like the complete other spectrum, which is like, well, we could do that instead, which is just 2 injections at home. And we've had complaints, and actually one that I generated myself, which was like, we went around through discussions around the concerns they had, or what was influencing their hesitation to proceeding with the diagnostic plan, with the treatment plan, which was around about $1,000 for a laceration of the eye and kind of trauma to the eye. And then after several discussions, we realized that finances were a big issue. And one of the main ones was the fact that her husband was non-contactable and she needed to make that decision with him. Right. So then I developed a plan, which was essentially, a next step down, which was let's give pain relief and manage and so forth, rule out, severe ulcers, and then have a discussion with your husband around, try to allow more time for a discussion to be had to address that concern. Even I can have the discussion with them over the phone. And there was too much of a difference between what I was proposing to what I originally proposed and what I finally proposed, that she felt like as if I didn't stand up hard enough for my original recommendation. So then the complete shift to something different, she was like she was confused by that and actually lodged a complaint. Because, or not complaint, but she provided some feedback along the grounds that, well, because I resisted, then that was the other option. Why didn't he just give me the other option?
From the outset,
from the outset. So I'm not sure if I'm articulating this properly, but it was kind of like as if she felt like that was a push to see whether or not they would take it. And if they didn't want to take it too hard, take this instead. So, but if I really believed it, then they would have been a bit more resistant to actually to try to help her adhere and get through, overcome the roadblocks to accepting the plan. So,
wow, and you sorted that out, I guess. I'm hearing you got that sorted out, or were you able to have a conversation?
The patient was fine in the end, and we've had conversation, but it was really quite insightful for her to provide that feedback.
Yeah, I was going to say that doesn't happen all the time.
Because it was very rare we get the feedback where they provide us information about when we are giving them an alternative option that's cheaper. Quite often they will take that and be happy with that, as opposed to actually be confused by that.
Right.
And they feel like they feel like as if the more expensive option was just a stab to try to make some money.
Yeah.
When the second option was what really needed to be done. So
right. Is there a way? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, is there a way in hindsight that you might have kind of reframed your trajectory, your offering, in a way that was more transparent for her, that you think might have made a difference?
Yeah, I actually listened back through the consult, and to try to see where the conversation changed, because actually this consult went for an hour. in between different emergencies, I let her had time to think, came in, addressed another concern, came in and out, in and out, in and out. And I expressed numerous times through the consultation about my the reasons why I felt that the option A was the best, and tried to like build ways around finance options and so forth to make that happen. But I think in the end, I don't think, and it was maybe right at the end where we decided to go with option B, where I kind of dropped the concerns that I had regarding option B, and I tried to make her feel good about option B, right? But made her feel too good about option B, that she was like, why didn't we just go to option B? Option A was just for you trying to grab some stuff out of me.
Okay.
So it was like, I didn't repeat my concerns in the end statement that, look, as we discussed, well, the original plan addresses all these concerns and would have helped us rule this out. But at this stage, we're going with this plan, and I can appreciate why. And I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, that it means that I can't rule out these three things or something. But so just I think at the end I should have just reiterated the concerns I had in a nice manner.
Right. And what you just described right now you probably already know this, that'd be a beautiful example of how to round on communication. That's the mindfulness. That's up on the balcony looking at herself on the dance floor. And the only other thing I'd ask, but I won't ask, I'll ask you though, is to add perceptual skill. What was going on for you? And again, if you can take it that next notch, so there's the content skill, the knowledge, there's your process skills, what you're describing, and then there's what's going on for you. And if you could be transparent with your staff, I don't know what it was. Was she attractive? I don't know. There's something that pushes our buttons, right? Sometimes we kind of get off our game. And if we can figure that one out, that's the full picture. And
that's what I was going to say earlier. Money especially, but a lot of communication things. A lot of that probably comes down to our own beliefs and values, and how you're brought up, and even personality style and that. So I find the money conversations particularly hard, but I think that's to do with how I was raised and how my parents were with money and that. So my dad, he doesn't listen to this, does he? I'm trying to decide. My dad would be the person who would, if somebody gave him an estimate that he thought was a lot of money, he'd be the person who'd react and go, no, that's ridiculous. So I don't know if that's why, but I hate that reaction when I give an estimate and a person comes back with a completely understandable negative attitude. It is. I'm with Gerardo. I understand it's a lot of money. I have complete empathy with that. I don't like spending a lot of money at the mechanic, but I take that reaction almost personally. So I try and avoid it at all costs. And then I'm very quick to do what Gerardo says, to go, oh, that's okay if you don't, we've got a plan B. That's but it comes back to great
example. Yes.
But it comes back to me, and I'm aware of that. I try to avoid giving estimates because I've learned that despite my best efforts, I really struggle with it. I try and find different ways to do it. But the question I want to ask is, so that's clearly a personality trait of mine. How much in your teaching or your thinking or what you guys do with communication, how much variation do you allow for, let's call it personality types, or like do you take that into account? Do you recommend people look into that, what they're like, what are their tendencies and those sort of things?
Yeah. Again, a great question. We do. And as I mentioned, we're teaching the content and the process and the perceptual skills. So in our safe little laboratories here at Calgary, our coaches are trained. I mean, we're inviting students to get inside their own self all the time. What are you thinking? Like, what is your thought process? Could be exactly like you suggest, money, we didn't talk about that at home. My parents brought the metal box out from under the bed on Sunday night, and I was told to leave the room. And so I feel that it's very personal. It's really none of my business. And then we have to talk about, well, if it's none of our business, but people want to talk about it, what impact's that going to have on your outcome? So we're constantly doing. Now, does it mean everyone's ready to examine their own biases and values? No, no way. I mean, this is lifelong skill. This isn't just take a course and you're off to the races. This is about, and I'm loving you how you're both describing how you're integrating this into your world of work. Because again, I think if we don't have it at that level, it just sort of, we know from the science and medicine, skills deplete right down to about 30 to 50%. So we can graduate them really as rock stars, and if they're not getting the mentorship and the coaching when they're out there, they're only holding on to a few pieces. So yeah.
Do you guys in your course, do you do any sort of personality assessments or personality styles, or so people can learn what, like, do you believe in the whole personality testing? I want to call it a trend that is out there.
Well, I don't. A lot of people do believe in it. If I'm out working, doing work cross country, and I'm working in a practice that's new to this, I might use it just as a starting point. The MMI, the Myers-Briggs is good, as you probably know it, or other ones. It's sometimes just fun as getting things going, because sometimes people have not really even thought about the fact that there's people that have different preferences and styles. What I don't like is when people get hung up on, well, that's my style. Yeah. It's like, well, it is your style. It's good to be aware of it. Now we need to stretch and grow. It's further to your lovely point about, your dad's reaction to money, and you're finding other ways of working with that. But number one, you know that that's a bit of a challenge. And so you're trying to iron out the kinks in that. And so I'm not just saying that's who I am and I'm not going to deal with it. So as long as we can get past our style, and then, I really preach on, it's not necessarily about how you want to be treated. It's about how they want to be treated. And it might mean you're going to have to act a little different and try on some new skills to be able to meet people where they are.
Yep.
That makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Oh, a lot of those things are what they call, we call it flexing. You know, flex your style. It's good to know what you're good at, and the fallbacks that you have but also it's also good to know how it is that you respond to stress, and how do you communicate in stressful situations. So myself, I'm a driver. I've become quite autocratic and directive and controlling, and I know now, and it's hard because it just comes out naturally. It's like, what would you like to do right now? It's like, I think, what do you think you should do?
That's great.
Put a lot in front of it. It helps me 50% of the time. But it's about flexing. So I always find when I listen back to consultations, and we talk about interruptions and things, and in our consult coaching. And when I listen back to consults, and you get these expressive people that come in that love the story, they tell this amazingly energetic and creative kind of story as to what's happened over the last 24 hours in a not so coherent manner as well. So with facts flying around, we needed this, but then what they and then you can hear the veterinarian just and then you just go, slow down, mate. Just let them finish off their thing. Okay. and then you have a real direct kind of persons come in, and they'll just go like, you hurt his leg. What do we need to do? And then you're like,
yep.
Yeah. So you can hear it back. And I found that reflecting and mirroring their energy and communicating the way they communicate with you somewhat can sometimes really help in terms of matching conversation styles. Yeah. So I don't know. That's something that I feel when we're listening to the consults of our veterinarians, that it helps them be a bit more mindful of how to have a comfortable conversation with someone in the consult room, and make sure that they communicate and listen to in the way that kind of it's comfortable for them. So, but
Oh, and I was just going to add to that, and also just our proxemics, right? Like our proximity to people, what the barriers are. So there's the talking part, and then there's just setting up the room properly. And, if you've got someone, you might not be staring people down. You might be kind of, adjusting your body so that it's not so threatening. I mean, it's all of that. And it's not just the one size fits all, right? It really depends on the person, the situation, all those kinds of things.
Well, one thing
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, Gerardo.
Yeah.
As soon as you said setting up the consult room, that piqued my interest. Is there a good way, or what are bad ways, or how do you set up a consult room for good communication?
Yeah. Well, again, I never got a chance to go into your consult rooms when I was in Australia, but here we're still back at the stage of even having a couple chairs in a room. And again, we might be really behind. It's about managing the exam table, ensuring that it's not a barrier, recognizing when we are sitting behind it, why we're sitting behind it. Is that appropriate? I mean, the safety of the patient as well. We got computers happening in rooms now. There's a whole art around engaging people in front of a computer, so that again, so I might be outdating myself, like making ourselves sound like dinosaurs.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that. Do you have chairs in your consult rooms where you would take the initial history if this is like a wellness visit? Is that something that you're doing already?
No, we have in our clinic we have a bench, an examination bench with a computer screen. So there is definitely client on the one side, me on the other side. But I personally don't use it like that. I'll tell you what I do, and whether it's a good or a bad thing. But we also have a little bench for the client to sit on, and I'll generally during history taking go sit down.
Okay, because you're tall. Yeah.
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 I just find it's I also don't like standing all day, so it's a nice break for me. I'll sit down and cuddle the dog more than examine, but start examining and start observing, or dog or cat or whatever, and sit next to the client and have a chat first, and then I'll say, okay, let me examine the dog, and we'll pop him on the table. But then it becomes a practical matter of the client has to be that side to help me control the animal, and I'll be on the other side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's great to have a look at. We found in the gender work we've done that same-sex dyads are more satisfied. So that tends to create more of a relaxed atmosphere if you're with another fellow.
Oh, really?
Versus a female veterinarian. Yeah, and it's quite remarkable, the satisfaction relative to same gender.
From the client's point of view, it's
yes, and from the veterinarian's point of view.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. So again, something to be aware of, like what's going on. Anyway, I mean, satisfaction is important, especially for our clients.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find maybe it's just in Australia that the men are generally more difficult clients.
And it might be different in Australia. Maybe that's just a North American trend.
Yeah, maybe it's my own perception, but that they're more likely to have an issue with the money in that. I find most female clients are quite happy to they might just not be verbalizing it. Maybe they're still thinking it, but they'll just go along with what you recommend much easier. Whereas the males we deal with, maybe it's just my area as well. Like, they're the ones who are going to say, "Are you fucking dreaming? No ways."
Yeah.
How much?
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be a cultural thing, a gender thing. I just want to finish up your question about the proxemics or the setting. We are really committed to helping our students. It depends on the urgency or the episode, but getting a history before they get their hands on the patient.
Okay.
And so it's the work that we've been doing is that this is I mean, you're still collecting history while you're doing a physical, but that's why the chairs, any kind of prompt that says we're going to sit and have a visit, and I'm going to learn a little bit about what's going on. It's just a lovely an opportunity, like you say, to get off your feet for a bit, to invite people to sit, relax a little bit, and some of them won't sit, right? And so you're going to be matching them as well, and maybe not saying have a seat, and they'll be saying. So try to get your history, and then you can integrate what you've gathered on history, obviously, into your differentials, as opposed to trying to pull it all through the physical exam. So,
okay.
I love the idea around the sit and how sitting perceptually for them feels like as if the interaction has occurred for longer than it actually has, as opposed to actually. So you've taken the time to sit, means that you've kind of now you're prepared to listen. and you're giving them your time, but also their perception of time is longer than, I don't know, like, is that correct, Cindy?
Well, it is correct. And I was just reading another report about sitting to eat versus standing, is that we're more satisfied and the food tastes better and different when we sit to eat versus stand.
Oh.
But we tend to eat more when we sit. So,
Okay.
So again, you'd have to be skilled, because if you don't want everyone sitting around for 45 minutes to an hour, right? So this is where, once the skills are integrated, you're signposting, you're going, oh my gosh, I love hearing your story about your granddaughter, and I wish I could sit here all day long. I got to pull us back on track, Mrs. Smith. So
that's a really good way to wrap that up a little bit. You know what I mean? Like
yeah. Those are just transition statements and signposts and all those lovely skills.
I'd love to ask you a couple of more specific questions, if you're okay with it.
Absolutely.
Is everybody good for time?
I'll get about 20 minutes. I'm sorry. I'll get to head to work at some stage.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So before chatting to you, Cindy, I put a post out on social media to ask for questions from our listeners to say, well, what are difficult situations that you deal with regularly, so that I can ask you, what do you say in the following situations, or how do you deal with them? I'll start with Gerardo. You had a few good ones as well, so I'll take it back to the money one. One that people worry a lot about and they don't know how to respond is, you've discussed money and it's not going all that well, and the client says to you, all you vets care about is the money. How do you answer that? How do you come back with that one without starting a fight?
Yeah. Well, I'd probably use an open-ended question. Tell me more about that. Tell me about your past experiences. Sounds like you've had a situation where you felt that it was more money than you wanted to pay, or was worth the what the offering was for Barney. So I use the skills, open-ended questions, reflective listening, or you might just say, you sound concerned. I want to learn more about that. So what we end up doing quite often is we think that we have to have a rebuttal, and we have to have an answer. And my rule of thumb is, when in doubt, ask a question. So when in doubt about what he's thinking, or what his past experience is, or what's in his craw, maybe it's a pre-Christmas and he wants to put a couple more presents under the tree. I don't know. But I want to create an environment where I ask open, honest questions. And, he might just say, he might just get really even more frustrated and just say, absolutely, you're frustrated. This stuff is expensive. I also know that you really care for Barney. And so we got to figure out what to do about that. So again, now you're going back to client perspective, because you've understood the role that this animal plays. Or, I know you don't really give a damn, but I know your wife does. And I heard you say early on that dog's in the house now, not just sleeping out in the garage. Okay, so I got to get real clear on what it is that you all want for Barney, so that we can come up with the best plan. So that's where we integrate that client story and use that when we come back to these difficult conversations, or when we're explaining and planning. We're taking into consideration the gestalt. Or again, in small animal, it's tougher, right? You go to farm and you can get a picture. You can smell, you can look at the ventilation, you can see who's working, what state the place is in. It's tougher in small, I find. You've got to get a little more story.
That's really good.
So
that I just had one of those moments where I go, all right, a light bulb moment. Okay, I like the question part. That's excellent. Gerard, your turn. Hit us with one.
You go, mate. You go.
All right. One of the listeners wrote in and said, as a female vet, she struggles to give feedback or advice to her male colleagues, whether it's and especially if it is not criticism but disagreeing with them. She struggles with that. What do you tell your daughter to deal with how to deal with that in a better way?
Yeah, and so would this be an owner, an associate? Is this a new grad?
I think a more recent graduate. Not super experienced, but yeah, she obviously knows her stuff and needs to disagree with one of her colleagues about something.
Okay. So, I mean, that's a tougher one. Sounds like she wants to disagree and have, and so she might, if she's got the stealth, she might want to just have a conversation before she wants to disagree and just investigate. Just say, I'm not quite sure how it rolls here, but when we have disagreements with one another, what's the protocol? What has the practice been? So, open-ended question. Well, I don't know. We don't really have a protocol here. Okay, well, that's fine. There's sometimes where I'm thinking you're not going to agree with me, and there's times where I'd like to share my ideas with you about what your thoughts are. I'm just wondering if that's something we can do. It's a conversation, and if she's got the guts to set the environment up, she's going to change the culture. But I would certainly start with, what is your perspective on us sharing ideas and giving each other feedback? She'll get some kind of reaction. She'll probably have to use some reflective listening, and eventually they'll have to kind of tidy that up and make a plan.
Good. Okay. Excellent. And the same person said, how do you give instructions without sounding like you're giving orders? So I'm presuming she's talking about asking the technicians to help her with something and that, but she doesn't want to sound like she's ordering people around.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of maybe the same kind of thing. Say it's the same kind of thing. And I would, she might want to just have a little visit with self. Is this relationship centered practice she's engaging in? Is it more doctor centered, kind of more directive? And so might want to just have a little check in and have a look at what her style is, what her tone is when she's asking. I mean, sometimes she's got to give instruction, right? I mean, if it's a more serious situation, but I think I would have a discussion ahead of time about how that's going to go down, and for her to do a little bit of checking in with herself.
Good. Okay. Have you got any, Gerardo?
No, I like the euthanasia question. That's a good one.
Aha. You go. You ask it then.
What to say when a client thanks you after performing a euthanasia?
Yeah.
Because the situation is, and when Gerardo, I've spoken about this before. You do the euthanasia, it's all good, and then at the end, the client says, "Thank you very much," and your reflex response is, "Oh, it's a pleasure," but you can't say that. So how do you respond?
Yeah. So this is how I got my career started, was end of life communication, and what I did a ton of work with clients post animal death, and it is such a personal time for so many of them. It's like you're kind of the artist that has painted a picture and it's hung on the wall. You will forever be valued, and they will talk about you years later. And so I mean, I might just say something like, if they thank you, and I might just say something, I so appreciate you trusting me, and that I could be here with you and Molly today. Thank you for letting me be part of your healthcare team. So it might be something more, a broader kind of comment, just acknowledging that they feel grateful, that they're appreciative, that this is tough and you were there for them. I don't think I'd interpret more into it. I might just say, thanks for picking me. Thanks for picking our practice. Thanks for trusting us to take good care of you both.
Good one.
That's really good.
That is a good
That's
one.
awesome.
I'll add that into my repertoire as well. That's excellent. And then the last one, Cindy, something's gone wrong during a routine procedure, and you need to make that horrible phone call to explain to somebody that we've lost your pet, or something went wrong. How do you start that? How do you even cross that bridge?
And so I like to get people face to face, right? If we can get them in, if they're not too far away. That's not always possible when we're so far away from one another. So let's imagine that we've called them, and we don't want to wait long on these. People get frustrated. They don't trust us. And so as soon as we're in a position to grab that phone, I would be calling Mr. Jameson and saying, "Mr. Jameson, I'm wondering about your day, how it's going. You know that Rusty came in for a routine dental, and I needed to speak to you about that. Things have not gone as we planned." So I might do that. if we can get them in. And I would say, if you have someone I'm worried about them driving, so I'm going to try to manage all those types of things. Yep. Disclosing medical error, that's a big kettle of fish.
Okay. Yeah.
So very often we start with the signpost and just say, this is something that this doesn't happen routinely. He's died under anesthesia. So it's signposting into this, letting them know what's happened. And then there's a whole dialogue that follows thereafter, which is a number of series of skills. And again, yes. I have lots of information on these topics that I can share with you whenever it's appropriate.
I'd love you to. We can put all of these in show notes.
Okay. I'm making notes. Did you want me to send you that cost discussion?
Yes, please.
Okay.
That would be fantastic.
Okay. A medical error.
Yeah, this has been incredibly insightful conversation. Thank you very much, Cindy.
Oh, we're gonna have to have more.
A focus session on one topic.
Yeah, you could. We could have a whole podcast series on this, just communication with Cindy. Alrighty. Should we wrap it up?
Yeah. I'm good.
Yes.
Cindy, was there anything that you wanted to cover in particular, or something, or?
No, I don't think so. There's only 2 points that I wrote down, like in addition to what I've already snuck in here and there, is that getting a client perspective is the new content of a history. Okay. We're still kind of stuck. Some places are very stuck, some very traditional histories, and we haven't begun to appreciate and integrate client perspective. It is so incredibly valuable in explanation and planning. When we actually get to giving information planning going forward, to grab hold of the story, the component parts of the client situation, of their experience. My example of my pregnant client who could barely get the old Malamute into the back of the car without help. She really wants to talk about end of life. And so we got to get that story and then figure out how to factor that in to explanation planning. And we've really got to work on empathy. I think I shared when I was in your beautiful country that, 300 visits and 150 of the patients were sick, and there's only 7% of those cases that had any utterance of empathy. 7%.
Only 7%.
Yeah. Now, again, this is done in North America, so I'm going to own some of that. But when I go around the world, we run shy, and I think we need to have a discussion in our practices as to its importance, what it is. It doesn't mean that with sympathy, it's not like meaning we own it. And then to talk about what holds us back from using that skill. I'd like to see that happen.
That's a big hobby horse of mine. I am in discovering what works for me, and then trying to, when I'm mentoring younger vets, is the empathy thing. But what I'm learning more and more is it's not for the client's benefit, or it's not just for the client's benefit. It's to a very large degree my own benefit. If I take that empathetic approach, I am much more resilient and much slower to feel much slower to feel burnout and frustration, because if I don't have that, then I'm getting angry all the time, and I'm all these stupid clients coming with me with their stupid problems, and they never listen and they never that. Whereas if I change that mindset to deciding to be empathetic, because I was going to ask you how do you do it, and so you talk about practical examples of things that you can say in empathetic statements. But how to get yourself into that frame of mind. Have you got any advice on that? How do you approach it? How do you advise people become more empathetic?
Yeah. Well, again, I'll go back to my daughter. I'm watching her evolve and develop her professional identity. She has peaks and bounds for sure. She deals with some really rough, ugly stuff, and as we all do in the profession. I'm noticing her being much more dedicated to taking care of herself. I know that sounds very trite, but I know the profession works hard. It works long. It sees stuff that's tough. She's also finding herself in practices that are, as it sounds like both of yours are, they provide space to talk about these issues. They have grief rounds. They examine their communication, the things that go well and things that go bad. I think that, there's a number of things in our profession that we have, they're sort of the untouchables, the things that we don't necessarily talk about dealing with death at a rate of 5 to 1 compared to human dogs. Like there's just some stuff that I think we expect ourselves to cope with. And we don't we don't always. I mean, we can be tough about some stuff and, the financial stuff and all of that, but they're big issues. So I'm watching that work for her. And so again, I think you have to be committed to want to survive in the profession. We've most certainly found in our research that relationship centered communication, which consists, which is that lovely developing relationship, not hugging and kissing everybody, but that nice balanced conversation with good skills, is highly predictive of doctor satisfaction, client satisfaction, and adherence. We've got 3 pieces of research that just showed that. So it's worth getting comfortable with these skills. Absolutely. And I mentioned early on mindfulness, again, that research coming out of medicine, that the employment of a mindfulness kind of orientation to life is helping to deepen people's ability to be empathetic.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
So if somebody wanted to learn more about all of these skills, what are good resources? There's obviously your book that people can read, but where do you go to get better at this?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to practices like both of yours, having mentorship. I think there's some CE out there for sure.
Any good ones that you can off the top of your head?
Well, I mean, your schools on the East Coast of the country are doing, Michelle MacArthur at Adelaide. You've got Allison across the pond a little bit. Dan Schull is he Brisbane?
Yeah, you
yeah.
a good friend of mine.
Yeah, he's good. He's very good. So, maybe in light of the distance, I mean, I'd love to come see you every month, but I don't think that's going to happen. But, even grabbing hold of those folks, I know Michelle would love to put together either a retreat series or an in-depth workshop series for people. I think she's just waiting for the profession to kind of go, hey, pick me. Dan as well. I don't know about him, how interested he is. But I think it's finding those people and empowering them and saying, hey, we want this.
Okay.
You can come to Canada.
Okay.
Hey, that sounds really good.
Well, I think did you mention some communication conference in St. Kitts coming up?
Yeah, we're in St.
That sounded good.
we were just in Banff this year. I would love to have you in the mountains. And then St. Kitts is going to be June 2nd to the 4th at the Park Hyatt. Got a great rate on it. This incredible. If you have someone special you want to bring, like it's a honeymoon or something.
Cool. While we're there, I'm just going to go to this conference.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe it's more podcasts. Maybe it's, people need to practice. This isn't just about reading the book, right?
Okay.
You've really got to practice the skills.
I think that's the key thing, is to practice it.
And as Cindy said before, it's one thing at a time. There's 70 something different things you can do. And quite often we go, what is the one thing what's the one thing that resonated for you in this workshop? It's, I got to listen more, or I got to not interrupt. And then just the next thing, what's the next thing you're going to do after a month? And
nice.
My thing actually was consciously having and saying at least one empathetic statement, right? In some way, if it was appropriate, in the before my physical exam.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was awkward because it felt awkward to me, but I could see them that allowed them to then somehow open up again, and gave them permission to then sort of express how they felt somehow. And it was only through seeing that I saw the value of that. But for me, it was a conscious decision that I wanted to try this. So. And I just, I see, I hear, I can, whichever way I use it, but I had to keep it really simple. It's like, as you said, empathy 101. Otherwise it was just too much of a big thing. And so.
Well, and please don't beat yourself up. I'm guessing if you read in the book about cognitive empathy, I'm thinking both of you use cognitive empathy a lot. So have a little read in that. I can't teach that here because the students just get so hung up on it. So, and I have examiners and they examine them on this stuff. Oh, and I'm going to send you a checklist that I use in a practice that I work in Florida. And they've included that in their performance reviews. So it's basically getting a bit of a metric around skills that you're using. And I use it carefully and playfully and supportively. So I'm going to send that to you so that, again, you might consider, that gets at your point about, well, how do you teach this? How do you build on it?
No,
okay.
Awesome. That's incredible.
Fantastic. I can't wait for all of that, and we'll put all of that in the show notes. I think we'll wrap it up there.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you both so much.